Engaged to the Unidentified was really not what I expected it to be at first. And then it turned into exactly what I expected it to be.
You know, that's exactly...
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I felt about it, too.
Okay. You guys are going to have to elaborate on this. I've already seen the show. I already kind of have my thoughts figured out on it. So just... What do you mean by that? Let's go.
So... I guess at this point we should say there's going to be some spoilers from this point on. Because to describe why I was like, what the fuck am I watching? There's spoilers involved. I really had to say, like, going in blind, the only thing I knew about the show was, like, I'd seen a bunch of GIFs and things of that nature, just goofy shit, like, Mashiro doing her, like, Johnny Bravo monkey dance in front of the TV or something.
Yeah, or the, her on the broom, like, jumping up and down, and usually a lot of people like to put rap music to it, which weirdly fits so well.
Yeah, and so, like, you know, for me, coming into this show, that's, like, my only frame of reference, and, you know, the initial plot is like, oh, hey, you're engaged to this guy, it's your 16th birthday, have fun. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, this is kind of contrived, and it sounds pretty standard, and then about, episode 4 or 5, we have Hakuya, the betrothed for Kobeni. He literally, like, Sonic fast, like, dashes out of the house, and it's not played up for comedic effect. It's like,
which they did do before with some of the characters. They're like, wow, they're fast, but they never, like, instant transmissioned their way out of the house.
Right. And so I'm like, I had to sit there for a minute, and I was like, now hold on a second, I gotta put on the brakes here. What the hell was that? And then, you know, from then on, the whole, hey, we're not actually human thing, I was like, oh god, where is the show going to go with this? And it didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but that's pretty much, that was pretty much the bell curve for me. It started out standard. I was like, okay, well, I enjoy this. It's very simple. It's, you know, comfy, cutesy. I think, you know, Kobeni is a absolutely fantastic, you know, main character, and I like the supporting cast. And then, what the fuck, they're not human. Okay, well, what kind of drama and stuff is this going to drum up? And then it just didn't. And I'm like, okay, this is fine. We're pretty much back to standard. So yeah, that was my confusion.
There was a lot of things that I felt like this show could have done with its like its backbone, its basis, and then it just never really did anything with those. And I will say I do like that they kind of like put a twist within a twist, because like the twist originally was that it was like, oh, he saved her, and that's why there was this whole betrothed thing. But then as soon as you see that happen, all of a sudden there's another twist where it's like, oh, and by the way, we're also not human. And I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah,
they could have done a lot more with it, especially because they had some things laid out that seemed a little bit more like they could have gone a different direction. Like, they hint at the newspaper girl, who I can't remember her name, but like,
that was Nico Ono.
Oh yeah. But she was like fascinated at one point, trying to figure out who this mysterious person was that she saw jumping around on the houses. I thought that they would have done something like that a lot earlier with her, where all of a sudden she sees something like that, and then she becomes obsessed with trying to figure it out, and then it becomes a kind of game of cat and mouse where she keeps getting closer to them, but then they keep like throwing stuff in her way so that she doesn't quite figure out the secret that they're not human. But none of that happened. Literally none of that.
And so the thing is, you know, when I was initially going through this kind of earlier on, I was thinking a lot of these things in my head. And then I did like a little bit of digging, because I went into the show pretty much completely blind. And then I saw this was an adaptation for Coma. And I'm like, oh, well, of course.
I didn't actually learn that until today. I didn't know it was a 4-coma adaptation. I completely didn't have any idea.
Honestly,
so
that makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yeah, and so that's the thing for me. Like that's about the point when it sort of normalized for me, and I just sort of took it at this sort of value of, okay, well, with that understanding, I can pretty safely say I have a good idea of how the framework for this is going to go.
But the weird thing is that it's so subdued. It's subdued even farther than what I thought it would do, because like we find out they're not human. We find out that they can transform. We get a little allusion to that, like Hakuya has a dog form or something like that, but we never see it. It's like I wouldn't even necessarily call this like fantasy realism or something like that, because
Magical realism.
Magical realism, because we don't even see the magic in this show ever. The most we ever get is that one scene. Hakuya goes a little faster than normal, and then in 2 other scenes there's people jumping on houses. 3 other scenes, and that's it. And they're very short scenes to begin with, so it just seems more normal than it is fantastical.
Yeah.
So the really interesting thing is, part of the reason why this seems so normal is because in so many other, like, I can think of a number of other like comedy slice of life sort of shows where we have characters doing that kind of junk, like jumping around on buildings and things of that nature for comedic effect.
Right, it's hyperbolized.
Right, and so when that sort of stuff is taken seriously in this context and engaged to the unidentified, it's sort of, it's kind of jarring to think that this is supposed to be, you know, it's interesting to think that it's being interpreted differently.
It also kind of muddies its own waters, because like there's a lot of characters that do the typical hyperbolized hijinks of like running away very fast or jumping out of a 2nd-story window after their sister that they love so much and shit like that. But
right.
It's like they try to mask it by being like, oh, Ine-chan or One-sama, are you okay? Are your knees hurt because you just jumped out of a 2nd-floor window? And it's like,
sister love.
It's such a muddy thing that you have these characters that are supposed to have magical powers, but you never see them use the magical powers. And even the ways in which you see them use their magical powers, you also see the normal cast doing magical things. And we're just supposed to take it at like, we're just supposed to, I guess, identify in our head, okay, well, that's fiction, that's not real, that's just hyperbolized, but this part's real, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It to me, I honestly didn't have a problem with this. Like, I actually pretty
it didn't weigh on
thought,
me, yeah, that significantly.
Well, the thing is, to me, I found it pretty consistently a source of humor for me. Just the fact that, you know, they're going about this whole thing, and it's like,
it's very kind of slapstick like, almost.
I'm sort of thinking like it's a Jaws sort of thing, where it's like they're not going to show the, you know, X until the very end, except they don't show the X at all.
Yeah,
rather,
it's not Jaws or Aliens where you actually finally get to see the alien or the shark. Yeah. We never get to see the alien or the shark.
And so, you know, I'm sitting, you know, watching the whole thing, and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe last episode we're going to see like a little dog ear on Hakuya or something, but, you know, we don't even really get that. And so to me it was just, okay, well, thanks for that tidbit. And I don't know, like,
it's not like that important, I guess, story-wise, but it's just something that like I noticed while I was watching the show.
Yeah, I didn't really think about the difference between the animation and the realism never being shown. Never really thought about that. But that's an interesting point, though.
I will say, honestly, a lot of those hyperbolized moments, and especially the characters' faces and their expressions, are excellent in the show, and I really enjoyed them when they did happen, because the show does a really great job of like having that humor and comedy through its characters suddenly becoming super deformed, or its characters doing something crazy like running away really fast. It was humorous, and I thought that was in its favor. It's just kind of interesting to think about the fact that like you also have characters with magical powers, but they never use them. So
right, it's not a point of contention. It's just
no. Yeah,
it really makes you think.
Yeah, I got you there.
I will. I will say, sorry,
That's
Matt,
okay.
you were going to say?
I was just going to kind of go back to your point about the bell curve of the show. It does kind of feel like the show could go a lot of different directions with its plot, and it never really does, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a lot of I think maybe Kyle, you felt maybe what I felt when I watched the show the first time, is that there's a lot of points, because this is not a normal scenario. Like, you know, relationships being depicted in anime, we know that's not very common at all. We've seen a couple of shows like that, but there's not a lot comparatively. And it does go into some stuff like that, but then it also like tacks on this supernatural plot, which doesn't get used very much at all. And it's kind of, when you say muddied the waters, it kind of is a good description, because there's a lot of stuff here that I feel like they dabbled in and didn't use to its potential, I guess.
Right. Especially in the way that they end it with like some hints towards future progression for all the characters. It felt like they were almost like waiting until a second season to show us more magical stuff, and they just didn't really want to show it off in the first season.
I kind of felt that way a little bit as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, Matt, I really pick up on what you're putting down there. Like for instance, like Setsugi, who is the she's
the assistant.
Yes, she's the assistant in the school council, who dotes on Kobene's older sister, Benio. And like we find out that, spoilers, we find out that she is also one of these sort of others, mystical creatures. And there's that very brief portion where she approaches Hakuya and is like, "Hey, marry me." And Kobene's like, "Oh god, what's gonna happen? She proposed to Hakuya. Da 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 da." And it's this very brief moment of some sort of drama, but it's very quickly resolved. And to me, I really appreciate very quick resolutions to misunderstandings kind of things here and there, and I appreciate that. But the thing here for me was, like, this situation didn't need to exist at all, because Setsuki doesn't really care about the situation at all. Like,
she didn't want to marry Hakuya at all.
Yeah, the only reason she said it was because it was her mother or her grandmother or something said, "Hey, if you find one of our kind, you got to claim him." And it seems like such a non-issue, because like Setsuki just doesn't care. She just does it as a passing thought.
Right.
And it stirs up all this completely unnecessary drama that doesn't end up being any actual drama. It feels like a brief bit of padding just to get to the next set piece.
Yeah, and I even wrote in my notes for this particular thing. Sorry, Matt. I even wrote in my notes for this particular thing that I was very specifically. I said I was very glad that these misconceptions were being solved, because we see in episode 8 at the very last scene she says, "Hey, marry me," and then by episode 9 we've cleared up almost every single misconception that came out of that. And I was glad that I specifically said I was glad that this was solved so quickly, because it was kind of a dumb idea in the first place. So I was like, well, I'm glad we didn't waste more time with that.
And Matt, as you were saying,
I was just gonna say that episode 9 is kind of an interesting dynamic of this show. Just for me, like, both times I've watched this show, I've just hated episode 9, like, completely, because I feel like episode 9 is, and this problem is kind of lingering throughout the show, pretty connected to what we already talked about, with the muddied waters thing. But episode 9, I feel like there's a lot of times where there's a misunderstanding that doesn't need to happen, and then it's resolved in like a minute, and then it keeps happening for a little bit, which is kind of funny, but at the same time it's also kind of grating, because it's this mix of, it's kind of funny that these keep happening, but it's also kind of annoying because we have to keep wasting I don't want to say wasting time. We keep using time to fill the space, as Zack said.
It's. Sorry, you go ahead.
Well, and the thing to me is, I could see how, in one perspective, you could argue that this is sort of like this very quick sort of conflict resolution sort of pattern going on here is, in some sense a good thing, because it shows that for these characters, their relationships are developed to such a point where they can actually, maturely or responsibly talk about these things without blowing things out of proportion because they're awkward. But I could see something like that happening in like Tsukigaki-rei or something. I could use that sort of justification. But here, I don't really think I could justify it in that way, because a lot of this happens because Hakuya is just that kind of character. He's just written to be this kind of very not talkative, kind of stoic protagonist that doesn't really show his emotions much. And I feel as though having these things come about because he's written as that type of character, and not necessarily because he's a kind of character that has these very specific reasons for being so awkward or quiet or things of that nature. I'd be a little more forgiving if he was an actual designed, fully fleshed out kind of character.
Yeah, we don't
as
really
opposed
learn much
to
about
the,
him.
No, we really don't. We learn that he likes getting patted on the head. He loves anything that involves Kobani. He wants to marry her. He likes building matchstick models that get crashed every fucking time. And we learn that he doesn't talk much.
And he's a puppy in his spare time.
And he's a dog.
Yeah, well,
but we don't learn anything about him pretty much in a whole 12-episode series in which he is one of the
main focus.
Two mainest of main characters. It's bananas.
I actually, I both agree and disagree with you here, because for Hakuya, I absolutely agree that he lacks so much characterization. The only characterization we really get is towards the end, when he starts to talk a little bit about himself because of the whole scar thing, where all of a sudden she sees the scar on his eye. But I don't think that he is the reason why those earlier situations in which there are misconceptions, I don't think that he's the reason why the misconceptions come to be.
Yeah, and he's not entirely the reason either, because Kobani has a lot of reservations about the whole reveal of her engagement thing.
Right.
She says, don't tell anyone, because it'll be embarrassing. But she doesn't say, don't tell anyone because it'll be embarrassing. She just says, don't tell anyone.
Well, but the reason why I say that is because in every single situation in which there was a misconception, he is the one that actually cleared it up, and cleared it up so quickly. For almost all of the misconceptions. It was like one of the first misconceptions where she was like, marry me. He was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm engaged. And then later on, whenever the Nico-chan says, oh, are you two dating? He says no, and all of a sudden, Konbini is upset about that, and then immediately afterwards, I'm sorry, she is not a general store. She's not a general store. But immediately afterwards, Hakuya says, I specifically said that just so that she would get off her case. Is that okay? It's never his fault why the misconceptions come up. It is clearly just the show wanting to make a misconception, and that's kind of why I both. It's a positive and a negative why those things happen, because I think it is a positive to the show that the misconceptions get cleared up so quickly, and I think it, to the show's credit, I think it's great that they have that. This comes up and then the characters actually talk to each other and they figure it out, and that's very mature. But it's a negative in that there was no reason for those to come about in the first place. Right. There's literally no reason why these should have popped up in the first place, and the only reason why they do come up is because some bullshit. And most of that 8 through 10 episodes 8 through 10, most of the reasons why any of the misconceptions come up in the first place is just because of Setsuki, who is not the best character in the world to begin with, and so it just was grating to see that happen.
Right. And to me, it feels like a lot of the sort of emotional stuff that gets sussed out as a result of these things, I feel as though, again, the misconceptions were entirely unnecessary, and I feel as though they could have had these very strong conversations or dialogues with each other that could have better benefited the show from it. And again, this is a 4-coma adaptation. It's not exactly like a long form, heart-to-heart sort of thing.
And it was
it's
trying to be...
understandable that it wouldn't have those sorts of interactions necessarily.
And it was desperately trying to be a rom-com rather than a drama or something like that.
I think desperately is a bad indicator of that. I think it does a very good job making a rom-com in that sense.
Well,
but yeah.
The reason why I say that is because there's a lot of things that the show does, especially specific jokes that it continues to do, that just grated on me by the time that we got to the end of the show, and I was just done. Some of those
jokes... sorry, go ahead.
Well, and the reason why I say that is because, like, there are so many times in which this show is desperately trying to do something sincere. There are multiple times in which our two characters that are in love with each other, Hakuya and I'm going to butcher her name again, they both want to...
Kobeni.
Thank you, Kobeni. They both have a sincere moment in which they actually profess at least some mild interest in each other. But the show is just so scared of being sincere that it wants to end every single scene that one of those happen in with a joke. And almost every single time, it's a joke about how out of nowhere this older sister comes in and suddenly breaks up the moment. And I think you telling me that it's a 4-coma makes sense to me now. Because I can clearly see that that's probably how they had it written. They had it written where it was panel 1, sincere moment, through panel 3, and then panel 4 is the joke.
Gag time.
Yeah. And it ruins it to me, because it feels like would they have gone a little bit more Tsukigakure, in which they actually just try for some sincerity. You don't need to end every single scene on a joke. It would have been a much better show. But it seems like they're just so afraid to do that they have to end it on some stupid joke that they've kept going for the entire fucking show, which got real annoying to me, especially whenever the older sister legitimately was becoming rapey. I was no longer interested in this joke at that point. When she's like, "Oh, no means yes," and all this other stuff, I was like, "No, this is completely non-consensual, and it's no longer even funny." I was losing interest in the first place, but now I've completely lost it for this joke. It's stupid at this point.
Yeah,
man, you have some words for this show.
It's just that I can sing a lot of praises for this show, and I actually really want to, and I hope that I get to for this podcast. But there are particular things that were too much for me that I think ruined what could have been not probably an amazing show, because I mean it's a very almost typical rom-com in a lot of ways, but it could have been a much better show.
I would almost I do agree with you, but there's a little technicality that I have a hard time struggling with. Is the fact that we call it a rom-com, and I understand that's exactly what it's trying to be, but for some reason in my brain, rom-com is just not the word for this. It's kind of like comedy with a romantic subplot, which I guess that's what a rom-com is, but I feel like normally it's the other way around. I feel like it's romance with comedy subplot,
It's one end of the spectrum for the genre, yeah.
And I mean, I've seen a lot of these shows. Normally rom-coms have a lot of drama in them anyway, so that's kind of different in that regard. But
yeah, they don't rely entirely on the comedy to keep them going. They actually, more often than not, rely on the drama to actually progress
the comedies to offset the drama, sort of thing.
Yeah, so I kind of get to what you're saying then, and I do very much feel that same way. So it's more of a com-rom than a rom-com.
There you go. Yeah.
but that's true though. Yeah.
Yeah. But what you were going on to saying, you were talking about the jokes getting repetitive. This is how I feel with every single 4-coma. Like what you're feeling now, and I understand it's a little bit different in this scenario because it's going like way too far and stuff. But to me, what you're feeling is kind of what I feel every time I see a 4-coma. I get tired of it. It's just normally the jokes don't go out for this long. So I mean, I just tire.
Are you telling me that you?
I just tire of jokes.
Are you telling
fast,
me that you?
So.
Did you not enjoy seeing Machiro get 1,000 Nessies for the 5th time?
I mean,
all right, but at least that joke was subdued. It didn't show up. It only showed up like 4 times in the show rather than 25.
Yeah. And don't worry, you're not the only person. I went and dug. I remember when the show first aired. A lot of people hated Benyo. Like by the end of the show, it was just horrible.
She's not
Like,
she starts off as a like sort of interesting character because there's a dichotomy to it where, you know, she is the prime proper intelligent individual, but she also has a very humorous side, and in that way it almost, at least initially, reminded me of Vashta Stampede, which is a weird comparison, but like
that
she's
is a very weird comparison.
well, it's
go
just
on.
that she's intelligent and she has her more serious sort of moments in the show, but then there's this underlying like humor and like lust for life, I guess. But in this case, it's lust for sister. So it was a lot more. I liked that difference between her different, because it made her a more well-rounded character, sort of.
Yeah.
That she had more aspects to her character than just one side.
But as the show progressed,
But-
it kind of...
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
like
kinda
she was
disappeared.
initially very entertaining, and then I really stopped caring quite late on. I do have to say though, I liked her late game because holy shit, does she have some good faces going on at the end there.
I mean, there's some pretty good faces.
I'll be damned if I don't have a very small folder of reaction images just
I love how you said that too, because it was almost like a sports thing. It was like, well, Bob, I gotta tell you, the first half was a pretty ugly thing, but that late game, she really pulled herself together.
yeah, she was tripping and stumbling, and God, she fumbled that, but did you see her face? Oh Lord, Phil.
God.
Back to you, Ted.
No, but I do agree with you. I think the jokes were old, but I will say the one thing that this show had on point every single time was reactionary faces and those like little bits of like animation making humor.
It's
Where
just
yeah.
it's a very pretty show. It's a very well animated show.
Gosh, the
and
backgrounds in this show are fucking gorgeous. When they try, they try so hard.
Yes, and they do a very nice job of it. They do a pretty consistent job of it too. I mean, there are definitely some points where I'm like, look at the quality of this one. You know, but I mean, all things considered, the high point of this show for me was actually just the animation.
Yeah.
Just the artistic direction was really nice. I gotta be honest, I kept having this like weird nagging feeling because I kept seeing like the characters had that white outline at the edge, and I kept thinking, this feels familiar, and it finally hit me in like the last few episodes. I was like, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Tsukigakure.
Yeah,
It's
the border reminds me of Tsukigakure especially, which is funny because this came first. But it's a very large white border around all the characters. But I think artistically it looks very nice, and it really helps to differentiate between a lot of the lighter pastel colors. I don't know why I couldn't say that. I liked that they were able to it allowed them to differentiate between these very pretty backgrounds and different things like that used lighter colors. But yeah, no, it totally reminded me of Tsukigakure a lot, and which is unfair to the show because they are not at all alike.
Nope.
Nope.
No, not really.
Not at all.
Now, I did kind of shit on the show a little bit earlier, so I do want to say one thing that I actually really did enjoy about the show, because I didn't.
Thing.
No. Okay, let me explain. There are multiple things I did enjoy. The biggest one that I enjoyed though was I loved that it's because we've seen this trope a million times of you're betrothed to this person, you have no say in it. It's a family traditional thing.
Nisekoi.
Yeah, exactly. But what I liked and thought was interesting about this one was that the focus was not on the boy as the protagonist, it was as the girl as the protagonist. And unlike other shows in which they say, no, you literally have no say in this ever, it was very much treated as the family wants you to do this, it is a family obligation, but everybody that's involved in this, whether it was, the sister, whether it was Hakuya, whether it was Kobini, they all said, but you don't necessarily have to do it if you don't. We're not going to force you into this. We want you to, but we're not going to force you. The choice is yours. And which meant that it gave her all the power in the situation rather than the boy. I thought that was a very interesting twist on this trope. And I'm sure that other shows have done something similar to it, but this is my first time seeing it in an anime, and so I thought that was a nice twist on it, in which it was the girl has all the power and all the focus in the show is on the girl. I thought that was nice. It was a nice little it kept things fresh for me, I guess.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, you don't normally get a whole lot of that sort of focus perspective.
No,
again, I mean,
typically
if
it's
we
focused on the guy, and
like,
because it's focused on the guy, most of the stuff that you see about the girl is like her being like, but I have to do this, and it's, it's my duty, or something like that, and that's like the whole fucking show.
Yeah, like if I dare evoke like Nisekoi or some other sort of thing, we do get, for instance, the perspective of, Onodera or some of the other girls, but it's a sort of adjacent secondary perspective that we get small snippets of here and there, and it's never really, aside from maybe like a designated episode or so, it's never really like the specific central focus.
And the only reason, and I think a big reason why some of those shows get away with some of those like alternative focuses is because they're harems, and so it's like one girl's betrothed, but then this guy's going after like 6.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I think it was a nice twist for me, and it was refreshing.
I'm very happy this show didn't turn into a harem.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we are focused on the girl, because the guy has nothing to do with this show. I thought he was an adorable dork, and I enjoyed him as an adorable dork. But if the show had been about him and his internal monologue, gosh, that would have been boring as hell.
Oh, yeah.
And see, again, it's another thing. His character really, I think, only works out because this was originally a 4-coma. Because in anything else, he would be a background character or a supporting cast member.
Yeah.
More like background character.
And you know it. Yeah.
He might have had a total of 6 lines. Maybe.
Well, it sounds like that's about what his running total is for any given episode.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't doubt it.
And that might be generous, but...
Yeah. Also, why... This is on a completely different subject, but this show's not an ecchi. I was very confused sometimes whenever there would just be like long scenes talking about boobs and butts, which I guess most comedy shows have to go for the lowbrow humor at some point. But there was also a lot of things like the OP has a lot of like sexual tones in it every now and then that show up.
Yeah, that was the
sexual.
It's very weird. It makes no sense tonally from the rest of the show, and then every now and then they would have the typical like etchy camera work where we're just staring at a girl's thighs for about 2 or 3 seconds. It's very weird.
You have to understand. I was watching through this, and I had to pause during the OP for something, and I paused. It was on a still frame of, little itty bitty Lolly Mashiro, like wearing like these overalls that like went up to her mid thigh, and her legs were like spread out in a spread eagle position almost.
Sweet
I'm like, fuck me, no, go. Because
it's one of those frames that is the exact.
Looking for my shoulder, I'm going over to the feds.
I'm going to jail.
I like to call those the parents coming in frames, because it's one of those frames where without a doubt, like your parent opens the door and be like, "Hey, what you doing?" and then that's what they see. I don't know what that happened to me a lot whenever I was younger. And I'm like, I swear, Mom, I'm not watching porn. I know it looks like it, but it's from Japan. You have to understand.
It has a lot of highbrow interest to it.
Oh my god.
It's like those Monogatari jokes where it's like the girl holding her breasts together and it says deep plot or something like that. It's like it's very weird in this show, because this show, there's no reason for it at all, and it just didn't need to be in there in the first place.
The opening is especially weird. Like
it
still gets
the
me.
Opening especially.
The first time I saw this show, the opening, I looked at it and I was like, what does this have to do with the show? I still look at it and I'm like, what does this have to do with the show?
Yeah, it literally has nothing to do with the show at all.
Because it doesn't fit any of the characters.
No.
Like, stylistically or
And a lot of them are just
personality-wise or
pervy
anything.
frames. Like, I'm just like,
I know.
what? Like, what's going on? Like,
They spend a full half second of her like sexually licking some, I guess, snow off of her
trust
hand
me,
or something like
that
that.
GIF has
God,
made
dude.
the rounds.
Oh my gosh. And then there's the one that I have saved on my computer from forever ago, where it's as a comment on that, somebody like made a part where she's like in the OP dancing and her boobs are bouncing up and down, and they just put like PhysX on it, like it's some Dead or Alive bullshit. Yeah, it's so stupid. It's completely unnecessary.
Yeah,
It's weird. Like, it got me every time, because it's just, you know, I marathon through a good bit of this, and so, you know, I finish, you know, the ED and everything, and, you know, I go through their little 4-panel, and I'm like, yeah, okay, and then it's, you know, this instant, like, jarring, like, hey, you ready to hope no one's watching again for 3 seconds?
Yeah, it's another one of those shows that I was like, well, it's a mistake that I started watching the first few episodes in public. I'm like, no, gosh dang it.
it's just,
Um,
I don't know.
but I mean, it's minor. It's very minor, but it irks me because, and it irks me in a lot of shows, but it irked me in this one especially because it legitimately had nothing to do with the show.
Yeah. Also, there was some very strange conversations. Like, you were talking about the lowbrow humor, which, you know, we've come to kind of expect out of some comedy shows.
Yeah, it's like, I can understand, because there's some, like, cute or, like, moe thing with all the head patting, but at least that one was explained away in the plot, in which he's kind of a dog and she petted his head, and so now he thinks that's just how people show affection because he's not human and he doesn't understand, so that's why he does it to her.
That's funny.
And I was like, well, that's kind of cute. It's just like a small little misunderstanding where it's just like, oh, this is how humans show affection. I was like, at least, even though that's like super like moe above moe, it's like, I mean, there's a fucking Twitter for this shit, but like, it's at least that's explained away in the plot, and it's not too terrible, and it kind of makes sense within the show. None of the sexual stuff makes any sense.
They had a whole conversation about childbearing hips, and that made me feel uncomfortable.
I was like, I'm a 25-year-old guy, and there's like 13, 14-year-old girls in this show talking about childbearing hips, and I'm very uncomfortable right now.
It wasn't even that. I was just like, what the heck is going on? Like, why are we even talking about this? This is not important.
Yeah.
Like, this is weird. I don't need to know what...
But they're assessing Kobeni's, you know, actual worth through what kind of...
If you, actually, the more the deeper you think about it, the worse it gets. So
I know. I know.
You don't want to.
I even wrote in my notes, I was like, because, like I said, I like that the emphasis was on the girl as the main character, and I like that they kind of did an interesting twist on it that was a little bit more pseudo, sort of girl power, in which, like, it's her choice, and it's her choice throughout all of this. But then you start getting all this other stuff, and then also the thing where it's like, well, he saved you in your life, so now you feel indebted to him for the rest of the show, kind of thing. And I wrote in my notes, I was like, well, this show is very much on the surface seems like it's for girls, but was very much written for guys, kind of thing. That's how it struck me.
I mean, I don't necessarily know about that, but
maybe I should. I said it specifically in my notes. It's written by guys. I think that's a little bit more accurate. Maybe.
I mean, I don't know who wrote the show. I mean, I have the name here. I don't know Japanese male-female names.
The author was a female, my dude.
Well, fuck.
Wow, nice try.
Damn it. But no, I mean, it irks me. I think it's kind of unnecessary, regardless. I don't know. I wasn't sold on it, I think it was unnecessary to talk about childbearing hips for like a full like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
In a 24-minute episode.
Author's gender aside, yeah, I it just doesn't feel right. It didn't feel right for the show. It just, there was no point. It was dumb. It made me feel uncomfortable, and yeah, no more of that. Stop.
Yeah.
Also,
anyways.
the ED referenced it every single time, and that also really bothered me because the ED was actually okay. So,
Matt, I'm sorry. I actually didn't realize that because I started skipping through the ED after a while.
I mean,
Oh, but the ED's so catchy. Man.
Oh, it's super catchy, and I would listen to it every now and then, but I wouldn't always like read the actual like karaoke for it all the time. But no, yeah, I totally agree with you. That's the unfortunate thing about that in the ED, and then the images in the OP is that the songs are the catchiest fucking thing in the entire world, and I love them. It's just unfortunate about that part because I'm like, I want these songs on my phone. They're real good.
Then
Matt, you'd be so proud of me. I actually made a conscious effort to sit through the whole ED.
Wow, good job.
I will say the imagery for the ED is cute as fuck. I love it.
I'm gonna be honest. I skipped the OP and the ED.
What?
Fuck. When do you skip these things?
You're not
I
the
was
man
kind
I
of in
thought
a
I knew.
rush, so I was just like, I'll just skip over them, save a couple minutes. Don't do it.
Okay.
Don't ever do that. That's wrong. If you skip OPEDs, you're a monster. I'm a monster. Don't do it.
Well, the shitty thing is that I do like that you're in the habit of not skipping them because we have watched many a show like Railgun or like Arema or something like that in which they literally changed up every single time. You have no idea if you're skipping important shit or not. Because there's always something going on in the OP and ED for those shows, and I'm like, gosh dang it.
Sometimes they're interesting. They change and stuff. You gotta pay attention.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of cool.
Pay attention.
Or like that one time in Kill la Kill when all of a sudden the bad guy just rips through the ED and starts getting real fucking horror creepy on
that
us.
happened. Yeah.
That was pretty terrifying.
You gotta be careful with stuff like this. They'll trip you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Overall, I don't think it's a terrible show. It's just it has issues that I wished it would have addressed because it would have made it a much better show. Like, I almost feel like halfway through you could just take out the older sister and it would have been a better show, with the exception of her reactionary faces.
Yeah, her visual comedy game was good, but it just the
was
humor,
about the peak.
because the actual dialogue humor was not good.
Like, I mean, it was fun. It was pretty standard.
Yeah,
I
was
think
hoping
it did. Like, there were a lot of points that it did really well that were largely canceled out by some other pretty stupid tropey garbage that didn't need to be in there. So for me, it's like, I don't think it was a waste of time to watch it.
No, I enjoyed myself.
I wouldn't go actively like seeking out to watch it again anytime soon.
Yeah.
No, I think it's definitely it's one of those shows that's worth a watch because I definitely did enjoy myself, and I know I came off a little harsh on the show. I legitimately did enjoy myself, and it was real easy to marathon because like the humor at least is mildly there, so like everything's totally fine. I can just like sit there and just kind of enjoy it for however long I'm watching it. But yeah, it's one of those things I'm gonna watch once. I don't really plan on watching it again anytime soon. But I think it's worth at least an initial watch for most people.
Oh yeah, and this show breezes by.
Oh
yeah, it felt like this show went by in no time at all.
Yeah, I will say to the show's credit, I don't know what they did in order to like make the pacing so perfect, but it really is perfect. A lot of 4 comas either feel like they literally feel like you're going from skit to skit, and it's very obvious that there's a break. And then other 4 comas, they like try to combine them all together, like Asamaga Daioh did. But sometimes it just doesn't really work out, or like the pacing slows down because they're putting a whole bunch of in between stuff. I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly what worked so well, but in this show, it just worked real well. The pacing was just on point the entire time.
Going back to what we were talking about before, it was a 4 coma that I didn't even know was a 4 coma, so there's some success there somewhere. If I look at a 4 coma and I know it's a 4 coma, I know it's going to be a bad time. If I feel the 4 coma,
it's just not really up your alley.
But it didn't feel like that, so that's definitely, there's definitely a lot of positives to the show. I came out liking this show more than I did before the first time I watched it. Not a whole lot more, but it's okay. I'm okay with it now. I've come to terms with this show. This is an intervention.
Student council vice president was the saving grace of this show.
Oh my gosh, she was the fucking
absolute
best.
girl. She's incredible.
Best character.
Yes, like my inner monologue
hands
the
down.
entire show was her. Right
Yeah.
there. That's me.
No,
Like, the only thing that we were missing was a House of Cards turned to the camera, speaking to the audience from her.
Oh my gosh, that would have been great, especially if she had like a House and Cards Southern drawl or something like that.
Get some Malcolm in the Middle shit going.
Oh, that would be fantastic. No, yeah, I enjoyed this show. I think it was worth the watch, definitely. So
Yeah, it's okay to give it a
anything
shot.
else anybody want to say?
No,
I'm
not
done.
really. It's
As usual.
I mean, if you're interested, it's worth a watch.
If you
but
don't like it,
if
it's
you've
not
got
a big
others-
deal.
Yeah,
It's a slice of life for coma. That's what you're getting, really.
pretty much. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you're looking for something to watch and you don't have anything else already planned, go for it. If you have other pressing things on your backlog, do those. So
Backloggers approved. Kind of.
It's
Well,
it's
it's-
like we
it's
put
more
half
like-
the stamp on there.
it's more like Backloggers.
Deem acceptable.
Yeah, like what is a level above inoffensive? We'll go with acceptable.
Except, okay, we'll just go with that.
For the time being, we'll shop it later. We'll get a whole focus group
We'll
going.
figure out the actual scale.
We'll get some good old nomenclature going.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see everybody next time.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah,
listening.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Wait, oh my fucking god. Her sister's name is Benio, and her name is Benny. She's Little Benny. God damn it, she's Little Benny.